Hello, welcome everyone. I'm Christina Voskoglou. I'm very happy to be here today. Good morning or good afternoon, depending where you are in the world. I am the Senior Research Director of /Data, and I'm here to talk to you about how developer communities evolve and the value that builders see in them. So I hope you have a nice mug of coffee or tea next to you, because you're going to see loads of data. So first of all, who we are, so that you understand where this data comes from. We are /Data. We are analysts of the developer economy. We survey about 30,000 plus, actually, developers annually. Based on their experiences, what they share with us, we provide research. We help companies understand who developers are, meaning what communities they're into, how these communities are growing, and then what technology choices they're making, how happy they are with those choices, and where they're going next, what they're trying to learn, what they're interested in, and so on. And as a result, we're trusted by several of the big tech companies out there. Feel free to go to our website for more information. Other than that, just a brief outlook of our methodology here, so you know what you're seeing really. As I said, we survey developers. We do that using 2 major survey waves annually, although we're currently running small ones in between. And we've run 20 of them so far, so more than a decade doing this. We reach developers from more than 150 countries, and we use a network of more than 80 partners and channels, from small local meetups to large vendor communities, not the same ones every time, so that we make sure we have a representative sample and not just the opinions of a single panel over and over again. We research, those 11 development areas you see on the left, and we ask about all of them because we know that typically developers are in more than one of them at the same time, and we want to capture the full experience and all the choices that developers make. And with that out of the way, I'm going to talk to you about 3 things today. At the beginning, briefly, I'm going to show you how the developer population is evolving. So the growth, how many developers there are out there. The main chunk of our presentation today is about who is behind that growth. I mean, okay, it's growing in numbers, but is it changing in profile? That's what I'm going to show you today mostly. And then last but not least at all is the value that developers see in communities, so that you have more proof, if you need any, that communities are important. Okay, and without further ado, how many developers are there in the world? So we have been sizing the developer community for many years now, as I mentioned, and we have not just 1, but 5 different methodologies using which we size the population, and happily they all converge around the same numbers. So we know that there are currently 24.3 million developers globally. And this is a very healthy growth. The whole ecosystem has grown, the whole population has grown by 28% in just 2 years, which is, wow, a lot. And given that growth, we expect that by the end of Q1 2022, so about a year from now, there will be circa 27 million developers globally. And as I said, we're looking into several development areas. So where's the growth coming from? Is it from which sector, from which development area exactly? So I'm now showing you just 6 of the 11 areas that we track, and just the annual growth, just to make a point here. Of course, there's wealth of data for all of those backwards. But anyway, year-on-year growth, there are sectors that are growing faster than others. And the one growing faster than most is machine learning, AI, and data science. So that's 25% growth in just a year. But then backend services follow, all the booming cloud and so on. And mobile is still growing quite healthily, around 21%. So these are 3 examples of sectors that are really booming. So their trend is almost linear, they're climbing. Then there are sectors that are still growing, but not as fast. So we saw some really steep growth some years back, and now the growth is slowing down, but there's quite considerable growth still. So between 10 and 20%. 3 key examples here are games, web, and desktop. And then there's a case of AR and VR, where we see some stagnation. So for quite some time now, the population there is stuck somewhere around 5.8, 5.6. It's not going a lot more than that. And in fact, there are many things behind that. I don't have the time to go very deep now, but it's, first of all, AR and VR, they're not growing the same. So there's a lot of disillusionment with the technology to begin with, especially AR. The mass market is not there yet, although recent launches and developments may change things. So we're keeping an eye on that. VR is more mature. But anyway, give or take those two put together, they're fairly constant. So that's what's happening with some of the development areas. Now, let me go into the profiles and look at some key demographics to begin with. So I'm sure you're all aware there has been a major movement in the past couple of years, even more, to encourage women to participate in the technology world where they're typically underrepresented. I'm quite proudly part of that movement. And it seems to be bearing fruit because women were about 9 to 10% at most of the developed population. But over a year and a half now, that share has been growing, and we're happily 20% now. And given the 24.3 million in total, that translates into 5 million female developers in the world currently. Now, and yes, it is communities behind it. At the beginning, we thought, oh, could it be that it's specific roles that women came in to fill in specific roles in the industry? And so I had my team checking that, and no, there's a growth even in the most technical roles, not just the creatives or the marketing stuff that it's believed that women usually thrive. That's where they take. So women in the space, their share is growing. Great news. Community-driven, more great news. Age. There's also, in some cases, some popular belief that the developed population is getting younger, that we have all these youngsters going in with the technology. So does that hold? Well, in absolute numbers, yes, because as we said, the overall developed population is growing, but as a percentage, no. So the under 25s, as you can see here on the left, have been a more or less stable percentage of the developer community over the years, around 30%. It is the second most populated age group, but it's not growing its share. It's growing in numbers because the overall population is growing, but no, it's not growing its share. Interestingly, the next age group, 25-34, is showing some signs of decline. We believe that this is linked to the drop in the popularity of startups, and as this deflates slowly, because this was the age group that mostly jumped in to try to find, the excellent new idea and new endeavor that will make them rich or something. Anyway, this is linked to there, and this is how it's gradually dropping. They're still the biggest group, but it's growing. And at the same time, we see some increase in the ranks of the older people. I won't say old, older people. So no, we don't have a biggest share of young developers, but we have a greater and bigger share of percentage, that is, of inexperienced developers. So which proves the point that young may imply inexperienced, but it doesn't work necessarily the other way around. So what's happening here is that we have had really experienced developers accounting for half the population for several years, right? Around here at the right, you can see 52%, 51% stable. And then suddenly start to drop. And now they are just below 40% at the same time. And the middle is fairly stable there, the middle experienced people. We see lower experience levels on the rise. And as a result, the average experience level of the whole ecosystem has shifted towards lower experience from 8 years to 6.4, 8 years back in 2017 to 6.4 years now. How did that happen? Well, that's first of all an immediate impact of the so-called democratization of technology, right? You don't have to be a super expert to be in the field to begin with. So several people of different age groups, not necessarily the youngsters, are getting their hands dirty without necessarily, and doing stuff, getting things done without necessarily being experienced. So this is one thing you need to know when building communities. You're probably, as the years go by, talking to less experienced developers. Now, it's not just democratization, there's also maturity kicking in here. And we see several things happening because of that. One is consolidation of roles. So as the ecosystem matures, although the jacks of all trade, they're less common as we move on. That means that people really tell us they have just one role. So we see increasingly more people saying they just have one role instead of 2 or 3 or whatever. And as a result, you see that for the first time, we actually saw less than half of people in the space telling us they don't identify as programmers, software developers. Of course, they do identify as something of the other technical roles. We've got plenty of them. But as you can see, most of those roles seem to be shrinking, and the fact that it's happening to all of them means, and we have checked number of roles anyway, but it means that developers assume less roles. Now, there are 2 categories of roles, so the creative and the business, that are not shrinking. You could even say they're slightly increasing. So we have a management role down there at the bottom, and product managers and so on. So what's happening is that as obviously the technology matures, there's ecosystem built around it to productize the technology, and actually the competitive advantage comes from everything around the technology, not so much the technical features, but the community, the resources, and then marketing kicks in, design, and all that. So that's what we observe here. And the other thing, of course, happening as a result of disillusionment as time goes by is that we see startups on the decline as a share of the overall community. So we asked professional developers what's the size of the organizations they're working, and these have been their answers over the years. As you can see at the 2 ends, we have the 2 constants. I mean, they're always freelancers, or those who are just them working on something, contract work. And of course, at the other end, there's always the big orgs doing their usual job. So these are the 2 constants at the end. But in the middle, there is a transformation going on. We see it's a natural process, right? So as startups begin to disappear or grow out of startup stage, we don't have that many taking their place, so their share is dropping. Same for, so it's 2 to 20 or 20 to 50, so startups, in a strict sense, and also scale-ups maybe. And at the same time, as some of them mature, actually don't die, we have many more medium to large organizations. As you can see here, they're growing. So it's more likely as time goes by, as you're building communities, that you will be talking to professionals who work in larger companies. And being in a larger company also comes with different needs, different budgets also, and so on. So that's also one thing to keep in mind. In fact, it's not just the size of the companies that is changing. So overall, as the ecosystem is maturing, we see all of those sectors being professionalized. So we see the share of professionals increasing. So what I'm showing you here is within each one of these development areas, so backend, web, and so on, what percentage is professionals? How many are professionally involved in each? Now we have a couple of areas, at least we have several that are mature already, and so they've sort of plateaued there, 80% for backend and 17% for web, for example. Or we have cases like games, where by nature, by definition, they're less professional, so we don't expect them to climb, they'll just stay there. So we do see an uptick there, we'll keep an eye on. Now, in between, we have emerging sectors that are rising. Remember, I told you machine learning, data science are the 2 sectors that are growing really fast. It's not just that they're growing in size, they're also changing. We have more and more professionals. So currently you have more than 50% of those into data science being professionals. And then you also see even steeper curves there for virtual reality. As opposed to AR, VR is more mature, it's proven more, let's say, very specific use cases. So it's climbing, we're having more professionals, and similarly, industrial IoT and consumer electronics. So another trend to keep in mind, you're talking to more professionals. And another thing that changes, other than the roles and how they're involved, it's also how they learn. And providing the right training resources is obviously one key aspect of several communities and several DevRel activities out there. So this is important to understand that also the way they learn is changing. And that's, again, a sign of maturity of the training resources this time. So as you'll notice, all of these are different methods that they told us they are using to learn to code. So the average number remains above 2. So each of them on average uses more than 2 ways to learn. Typically, it's self-taught plus something else. Not every time, because this is not 100% here on the left, but it's quite common. However, this is declining sharply. And as you can see, this is the same with most methods. Only exception is developer bootcamps, which are more and more popular. So what does that mean? Again, consolidation of learning methods as well. So they know which way they want to learn, or it's easier for them to find what they're looking for in one place instead of having to look all over for whatever they're looking for. So they sort of have made up their minds how they go to learn, which is always very important to know. Their needs are also very different. And that's not just about time, it's also about different profiles. So as an example about different developers having different needs, I'm showing you here the extra needs that developers said they have due to COVID-19. So we asked them, how did the whole chaos affect you? And this is what they told us. So if we cross that with years of experience, we see that it is the most experienced guys there, so 6+ years and gals, as compared, have different needs than the inexperienced ones, right? So the most experienced are more interested actually for flexible working hours. And in fact, it's interesting that that's the most popular answer across the board, but that's another story. Collaboration tools also, their importance increases as we go with experience. And while online training drops, and we have several others in between, like online networking and peer networking are more important to the people with a moderate experience. So this is just an example to demonstrate that different segments have different needs. Segmentation is key. We strongly believe, we have been doing it for a couple of decades personally. So it's very important. So here I've just shown you aspects, different angles in which the profiles change. But what you really need to do is create segments and see how the segments have evolved through time. So understand what segments you're talking to, because most likely, as here, so developers, suppose you had a one-dimensional segment just on experience, you would see that they have different needs. Therefore, you would need to adjust your offering. Fine. Would you need to go into the trouble of a community? So let's go into that. What do developers think about communities? So taking open source as an example, we asked them, what do they value in open source? And as you can see, collaborating, interacting with the community is the number one answer, is the top answer here, what they value the most. And if you notice there, professionals, which is that orange bar, are value community more than non-professionals. And remember, the ecosystem is being professionalized, right? So this is very important. So communities are growing in terms of value. It's in that way. And in fact, if you read down the list here, even the other two attributes of open source that developers value, the second and the third most important, are also linked to community. It's about the continuous support, which stems from the community, right? And about contributing, which is a trait. While other stuff, the things that have to do with product, so creating product derivatives, or technical, so debugging, or business cost, they're further down. So community beats that. It's more important. But is it just a nice to have? Is it just something that they value, or does it have an impact? Well, it does. Big one. So we also ask developers, which technology categories do you use? And here there's just some of them: CI/CD, app monitoring tools, third-party payment APIs, and so on. And we say, okay, fine, you use this category of technology. Which tools or which platforms are you using? These ones, great. Why did you adopt tool X? Why did you adopt platform Y? And guess what? The answer, because of the community, came up nearly 30% of the time in most of those technology categories. You cannot say it's a trade of a single one. It's not just CI/CD, which does have the highest percentage there. It's all of them, more or less. So it's not just something that they value. It's a reason to adopt a technology. And it's not just a reason to adopt a technology, it's also a reason to drop a technology. We also ask them which tools within each one of those categories, which tools they're using or they stopped using, and then why. Why did you stop using tool X? And again, 1 in 5 said because of the community. So it's really important, right? If you needed proof there. It's not just about something that is nice to have. It's something that they use it's a reason to adopt the technology. And in many cases, it's even a reason to drop a tool and go for a competing one because it has a better community. So bear that in mind. But what does good community mean? That's a long story. We are asking that as well. Unfortunately, I'm running out of time. So we'll discuss that another time. We'll be asking that in our next survey. So keep in touch if you want to know more. And in the meantime, you can head towards devrel.devrelx.com, where you'll find loads of data on dev population and trends. And there's also the book. Our book, well, we didn't author it. We have 24 authors, all leaders in the industry who share their experience about DevRel. So you may want to have a look. And that's all from me today. Are there any questions, please? Okay, so I can see there is on slide 14. Let me go back to slide 14. Where's slide 14? Here. The greatest portion of learning is done being self-taught. Does this mean people prefer being autodidacts, or is there an element of learning with their peers? Self-taught mostly means we had other also options there, learning with peers and checking other people's code, for example. Self-taught is mostly, trying your hand trying your hand with the code, really. So yeah, using whatever resources. It's not using online resources. That's a separate answer. If you see there, it's not on the job. That's also another one. And it's not checking other people's code. I haven't showed you all the options here. So it's really, yeah, being self-taught. So do we have other questions? I don't think so. Q&A. Is there anything in the chat? All right. And with that, thank you too. I see some really good comments. Thank you for all those. I'll leave you, but do get in touch if you want. Our info is on the last slide there. @Data HQ on Twitter. Hello @DataCo. Drop us an email, and we'll be happy to follow up and answer any more questions you may have. Until then, bye for now.